My job is I'm a specialist emergency physician.
My role is as the on-call general surgeon of the day.
My job as an orderly is to move the patients from ED to wherever they need to go.
I'm a surgeon, general surgeon.
My job is trauma nurse coordinator.
We're recent graduates. We started February, not very long.
Yeah.
I'm a social worker in the emergency department. We're a little bit superstitious in ED and we hate to say the Q word, but it was quite a quiet day.
This is where I was that Friday afternoon on the 15th when I first heard that 2 men had run into this hospital claiming they'd escaped from a mass shooting at the Noor Mosque. They'd run across the fields to us. That took them about 10 minutes from when we now know the first shots were fired.
We could see cars driving up the road the wrong way, coming into ED.
The first thing I saw was the child coming through, being carried, and I was like, oh, here we go, this is actually big.
The initial report I heard that there was 5 victims, and then we heard more, and then we heard more.
There's another 30 patients coming, and when someone said that, it was like...
What you see is people hurting, that's what I see.
Some ammunitions are known as open point or hollow point ammunition. And the whole point of that bullet is to cause as much tissue injury as possible. So they tend to, for want of a better term, ricochet around, and in the process of that cause injury to organs which are not normally in the path of where the bullet would go.
And the patients were amazing. They were so calm. However, it was later on, once we started scanning these patients and seeing the damage on the inside, that was just what you saw and went, wow.
What struck me was just how many were coming into the torso. This was not just something that had gone through a limb, it was life-threatening injuries. These people were incredibly unstable, they were potentially dying in front of their eyes.
Technically for that case I activated the plan before we should have. Normally you do it for 10 or more patients. We hadn't had 10 by that stage, but there's just a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Almost every bay which had patients before the start are being emptied out very quickly, and in those spaces being immediately taken up with what had come in. And then a second tsunami as what felt like hundreds of staff from the hospital proper came down to help, doctors and nurses and everyone else. So I put them all in the space you see behind me, what's called the fishbowl.
It was a bit like Formula One pit stop. What really struck me was, one, there was this degree of calmness and organisation about how this was going to work. Probably the most important thing was say, hi, my name is Saxon. Making teams work is all about knowing people's names. And so when we started, it's, hi, how are you? Who are you? What's your role?
I was shaking a wee bit at one point, but you just got to do what you got to do.
There are people that work in this department who help run it, but are not necessarily medically trained. And, they were providing life-saving intervention in terms of compressing wounds that were actively bleeding.
Normally I wouldn't touch the patient at all, but on that day it was different. He had a bullet hole in his shoulder here. He had 2 or 3 other bullet holes in his body that other people were working on, and we had to take him to theater. And as we were going to theater, I was pushing him with this hand, and I held the pressure down on the bullet hole with this hand as I pushed him to theater, because it was just that kind of day.
I saw extraordinary people do extraordinary things on that day. I'm a surgeon. Mainly my surgery is very controlled, planned. Well, this was completely different. I was involved in a team that had a very sick patient, and that went on for 24, 48 hours till we could get that person stable, and the number of tasks that had to be performed to allow that patient to still be alive at the end of that weekend is phenomenal.
One patient who was probably the sickest had 6 total major operations involving chest and the abdomen.
If you'd asked me that when we first saw what we saw, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that was possible.
There's a lot of detailed text in there of what you're supposed to do when this hospital's faced with overwhelming need. It's amazing when I read that afterwards that, we pretty much followed everything on there.
For a relatively small hospital on the world stage, we should be very proud.
I feel like we did really well that day.
I think we did too.
Yeah.
When you see the emergency department go into a response like that, it's quite well orchestrated and it appears very chaotic, but people are really clear on what they have to do. And I wouldn't want to witness that again, but it's something to see, really.
I've been sleeping all right. I know some people haven't, and everybody handles it differently.
I had a lot of I had trouble sleeping. I felt like you were just constantly wired. You'd get to sleep, you'd wake up, you'd relive all this. Should I have done this different? What could we have done like that?
You do, you see things you can't forget or won't easily forget. And it's similar to when I was a registrar on the earthquake day, and you still remember things you saw on that day.
You know, the earthquake was a natural event. Well, this was human-induced and targeted a very specific group of people who had done nothing wrong.
My way of coping is slightly different, and I'm very lucky that I get to follow right through.